So good evening again, everyone. My topic this evening is about gratitude. And I'm going to start out with a couple of quotes or thoughts from our lineage tradition, and then talk a little bit more about this practice of gratitude. And we'll also be having some discussion later on. So, in the Avatamsaka Sutra, it is said that our true nature is boundless, joyous, selfless, and pure. And the Dalai Lama is often quoted as saying that all beings simply wish to be happy. He's done so much writing and talking about happiness. And in our lineage tradition, at the end of a morning service, there is a dedication of the chanting and the practice for the morning that says, we pray we may be able to show our gratitude to the four benefactors. So we pray that we may be able to show our gratitude. So this idea of happiness, joy, and gratitude are woven throughout. As I think about gratitude, what comes up for me right now is the challenge of gratitude in the time that we are living in, right? When we're being confronted and reading news daily of COVID cases rising and the political divide, and so much that needs our care and attention in this world, things that draw us outward towards action. What is this practice of gratitude in our practice now? So there's a time that there's this sort of balance of attending to the outward needs of what is called for in this world, and also attending to our own needs, how we're responding, our own suffering, our own karmic reactivity that's triggered by all of this and by the circumstances that we all find ourselves in. So I invite you to consider both, right? This practice of turning outward and this practice of turning inward, and how we can turn this stream of compassion both inward and outward. And so specifically, one aspect that I want to talk about is something that I feel like I talk about regularly, but it's such a big part of my practice, and it's so supportive and so helpful that I want to talk about it again now. So where we're headed tonight is, I guess I want to give you a sense about how gratitude is interwoven in our tradition, and how we can actively cultivate it and what that means for us. So, as I said, that's one of my all-time favorite passages of that quote from the Avatamsaka Sutra. Our true nature is boundless, joyous, selfless, and pure. And the rising of gratitude is a natural expression of our Buddha nature, of that nature that is boundless and selfless and pure. But gratitude is really tricky. It can be kind of a loaded word in some ways, because it sometimes feels like one of those shoulds. Like, I should feel grateful. I should feel, sometimes our circumstances are, like, on paper look pretty good, but yet we still suffer and we still work with that. And we actually sometimes don't feel grateful, even if we have really good circumstances. So I'm not suggesting, when I talk about gratitude practices, that we are putting on an attitude or suppressing or slapping on in any way something that doesn't feel authentic. That is That is not what this is about. It's not about a squishing down and saying, well, I should be grateful. Yeah, no. This is about how do we set the stage so that it naturally arises. It's not force, but how can we set the stage so that it naturally arises? Remember years ago, Vicki Austin, a teacher from San Francisco Zen Center, gave a talk at Dharma Rain. And I remember asking her, sitting in the hall and asking her, what do you do when you don't feel gratitude? I forget what her topic was even, but I was just like, I'm not feeling it. And feeling kind of like, maybe I should feel it. Like I was just talking about, like, so what do you do when you don't feel it? And I remember what she said at that time, which she said, attention is the gateway to gratitude. Attention, paying attention is the great way to go, is the gateway to gratitude. And also the great way to gratitude. And that talk was many years ago, and it really stuck with me. And initially I kind of took that on as a kind of a koan and a challenge. What does she mean by that? But it gave me permission to feel whatever it was that I actually was feeling, and to start out simply by noticing what is. And that's what our Zazen practice helps us with, right? It cultivates our ability to attend to whatever is arising now in the present moment. So I'm going to suggest some practices for gratitude, for setting the stage for this, for coaxing this forward. Some of these you've likely heard before. I think reminders can be helpful. I know for me personally, repetition is very good. And one I'm sure that you've all heard before, it shows up all kinds of places, is keeping a gratitude journal. So doing something like writing down 2 or 3 things every evening or every morning that you're grateful for. I'm going to add a couple of twists on that, though. Is one suggestion that was very helpful for me was to find something new to be grateful for every day. So I noticed for myself, I'm often thankful for pizza, and that pizza would come up in my journal again and again and again. And so what it does, if you're looking for something new, is it primes you to be scanning through the day for something new to be looking for that you appreciate. It's because you can kind of get you can kind of just have it be the same thing. So it actually primes you to be actively looking for those things that you are grateful for, that's different, that's new, that you would put in your journal. So another practice on the other side of the day, so the gratitude journal is at the end of the day, a practice for the beginning of the day that I heard about by listening to a talk by Steve Stuckey from San Francisco Zen Center again. He's the abbot there. And he gave, this was a while ago, but I was listening to some of their talks. And he gave a talk entitled Gratitude in October of 2013. And he mentions this practice of, as he got up in the morning, he would think about what he was grateful for as he got out of bed in the morning. So before feet hit the ground, what are you grateful for this morning? And I find that really helpful also, because I'm not a morning person. And so it does help to, and if I'm kind of grumbling or just not feeling it, it's really helpful. Like, oh, actually, I'm grateful to have a safe place to be. I'm grateful that I actually can get out of bed. I'm grateful that I have coffee in the kitchen that I can make. I am grateful I can take this deep breath and take this wonderful stretch. And it does help set the tone for the day. And again, it kind of primes us to be inclining the mind towards gratitude as we begin our day. And again, it's not about slapping on something that we should be grateful for. It's about actually pausing and really noticing what is arising right now and what is it that we are appreciating in this moment, large or small, but not about what we should be grateful for, but what actually are we experiencing in that moment. What's really striking and poignant about the talk by Steve is that he gave that talk on gratitude after having received a terminal diagnosis of pancreatic cancer. So he was weeks away from transitioning, and that was his talk about being grateful and how he was so grateful for many things in his life and his community, but also this practice of leaning into gratitude all those years. It was there. It was there for him. So really lovely talk. So a couple other things that I want to mention. One thing, looking at my time. So I want to share a little bit of a twist and a kind of a longer passage from an article as I was preparing for this from Lion's Roar from a teacher named John Tarrant. I'm hoping I'm saying his name right. So he also wrote on gratitude with a little bit of a twist about obstacles to gratitude. So I'm going to read a passage from that. It's a little bit long, but I think it's worth it. And then I'm going to send you off into some breakout rooms again with some questions. So just know that's coming. So he talks about some obstacles to gratitude. So I'm going to read this. He says, resentment and bitterness are the residue that comes from dashed experiences. Since the world doesn't fit our stories, there's a tension where I expected life to be more favorable to my hopes than it had been, or feel that the world had not bothered enough with me. That bitterness sticks in the body and the mind, so that the mind reruns the painful stories and the body stores them in awkwardness and discomfort. He goes on to say, I have a friend whose father disappeared before she was born. The father was opposed to the autocratic regime in South Korea, and one day in 1955, he disappeared. Nothing was ever known about what happened to him. Anna tells about standing outside the prison in Moscow once a week in the freezing cold, holding a loaf of bread that she hoped might get to her son. In my friend's case, they didn't even know whether her father was alive. Then her mother was arrested, and she, the daughter, was born in prison. The mother blamed the father for abandoning her. She never forgot her bitterness. She talked about how he'd ruined her life and didn't think of herself as a mother. The child played piano and was a prodigy. Eventually, she came to California and studied early music and taught and lived a very independent life. She went back home from time to time in a dutiful fashion, but in their meetings they were sullen and difficult. She would arrive from the airport and her mother would say, "Why don't you color your hair?" The mother had moved to an old age home, and the daughter went back for another ordeal recently. So you get this picture of this tense relationship. Her mother liked the kind of red bean cakes that are made in the shape of a fish. They come at many levels, from very expensive to really cheap, and her mother was familiar with the high-end ones. But my friend went to a street vendor and got lots of the cheap comfort food bean cakes. Then she went into the rest home and gave them out to everyone, saving 3 for her mother. Each day she bought the cakes. On Sunday, when the bakers didn't make them, she told her mother that she had eaten all the fish in the North Sea, and she'd have to go fishing for her in the South Sea. Suddenly, they were laughing together. There was a mountain behind the home, and the daughter is a teacher of flower arranging in the Japanese mode. She wandered up the mountain with clippers and made large arrangements for the home. So the mom's living in this nursing home. Everyone was delighted. I thought, why am I worrying about my relationship with her? The time for that has passed. She isn't my mother who wasn't a mother. She's old and sick and dying. It isn't that I forgave her or that I let go of what had happened, the childhood I didn't have. It wasn't that. Nothing had happened. There was nothing to forgive. We talked and laughed. She hadn't been eating till I came, and then she started eating again. I'll have to make another trip back for her funeral. The koan way of looking at bitterness is that when it's happening, you are barking up the wrong tree. You are trying to forgive or let go or explain why your mother should have been a mother to you. None of that works very well. But if nothing happened, all you need to do is buy red bean cakes and hand them out, and everyone is happy. So kind of a long ways to go for that. I hope you stayed with the story, but I love that moment at the end where there is nothing left to do. Let go of all the past. And it's pointing us to what are the obstacles to gratitude, what gets in the way, right? Our ideas and our notions. So I'm not going to take credit for these questions. He came up with these interesting questions to be asking ourselves, particularly around the time of Thanksgiving coming up that many celebrate. So here are the questions, and I'll put them in the chat too. So who am I grateful for? What prevents gratitude? What is bitterness about? And what are the practices of gratitude? So I'm going to invite you to go back into breakout rooms. And the overall thing, I'm going to put those questions in the chat, but I'd also love for you to be checking in on what are gratitude practices for you and what are the obstacles to those practices. And we will come, so I'm looking at Cameo across the cyber waves. So I'm going to put you back in breakout rooms. We'll be there for about like 8 or 9 minutes and come back in 10. And then we'll just share with that. And then we'll close with a gratitude meditation. So Cameo, you could send everyone on their way. And then we'll come back. Cameo, I'm wondering if you could maybe make me host again so I can send a message.
Yes.
Okay. And before you go, did those instructions seem clear enough?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
I think so. All right.
So now do you have a room to go to yourself?
You might have to put me there once I make you host.
Okay. All right. Oh, okay. I will put you where I was, I think. Okay, off you go. Thank you. forgot I was hidden. Looks like we're almost back here. Looks like one room is not quite back.
I think we're all back.
Oh, we're all back. Okay. All right. Well, so without sharing what somebody else shared, I'm curious if how the discussions went and what you noticed or what came up around gratitude practices and obstacles to gratitude. Anybody want to share how their any flavor of their discussion?
Well, I think that that the obstacles that came up were the same ones that you talked about, resentments and holding on to anger and is an obstacle to gratitude, hanging on to a belief. I really enjoyed that story that you read, and hanging on to a belief about somebody that and then realizing you can let go of that belief and be grateful for that person, even though the things happened in the past. So that's kind of what I got out of your talk and then being in our group.
Thanks, Penny.
I think it was really, really easy for us to identify who or what we were grateful for. That wasn't a problem. I think that was really easy for all of us.
Well, that's nice, right? It's nice that that comes easily to mind. What about, were there additional gratitude practices that that anybody else shared that didn't come up in what I shared, or? Has anybody done any of those? I'm kind of curious.
I have one called have to get to. So every time you hear yourself saying I have to do something, you change it to I get to do this thing.
Mhm.
And I thought it was hokey when I first read it, but it's turned out to be pretty powerful for me. So my best example is the dentist, which I have to do a lot. So I get to do that.
Yeah, I've heard you mention that before, and that is actually really like a subtle shift that really makes a difference.
So one that came up for me today was not a practice so much, except for mindfulness of being grateful when I recognize another blind spot or something that's a source of upset, like crap with the computer, and recognizing, being mindful of what's going on. And it didn't fix the computer, but it made me aware that there's a whole pattern there that I can pay attention to, and I can be very grateful for just recognizing it, just recognizing the underlying thing that was going on. So that was good.
Well, one of the things that I also wanted to mention was that gratitude is often the recommended practice for greed. So we talk about the three poisons of greed, anger, hate, or delusion. And gratitude is recommended for greed, for that quality of mind that grasps or wants to draw things to us. I thought that was really interesting. It's not what I'd have immediately thought of, but inclining the mind towards gratitude can help us to notice what we have that supports, rather than this grasping quality of what we don't have. Kind of opens us up into abundance rather than retracting into scarcity, which is so easily done. Any other thoughts about what came up in your discussion? I'm kind of curious to know, given what we're all in the middle of a pandemic, right? So I'm wondering if this is a challenging practice at this time or not really. I see shaking heads.
Well, I can just speak for myself and say that, I mean, I feel that my life is so filled with things to be grateful for that even though I'm frustrated by the pandemic, I just can't help but feel grateful every day for so many things. It just feels natural.
And I think that the challenge of our practice is as what you describe about being able to hold both, right? So we can appreciate what we have, while still being present for the suffering of the world and what is happening. So being able to hold both, and sometimes that can be finding that razor's edge can be really a challenge. There's so much going on right now that it can be difficult to notice all that is wholesome, all that is good. So just, but we also our practice is also to bear witness and to engage and to be bodhisattvas in the world and notice the suffering and respond. So there's both of those things. So I'd like to end with a kind of a guided meditation in gratitude. So you can find a comfortable, it's fairly short, kind of comfortable posture. So settling in for a moment here. So focusing initially on the breathing. Just a moment to settle. And you might bring your attention to the heart center. And as you inhale, visualize inhaling, breathing in kindness into the heart. And with every exhale, breathing out any negativity that might be arising. Breathing in kindness. Next, I invite you to call to mind some kind of blessing in your life, a person or a thing that you are grateful for. Bringing that person or that thing to mind as completely as possible. Imagining it vividly in the mind. And as you're holding this person or thing in mind, send a thought of appreciation to that person or to life for that situation with a simple thank you, sending appreciation. I invite you to notice this experience of feeling gratitude in the body, taking time to feel sensations of the body, what you're noticing right now. So you're resting in gratitude for that person or situation, thing that we're grateful for. So coming back together. So that is my talk, and that brings our evening to a close here. But thank you all for being here. I'll say the closing verse. So if you would make that show. Abiding in this ephemeral world, like a lotus in muddy water, the mind is pure and goes beyond. Thus we bow to Buddha. All Buddhas throughout space and time, all honored ones, bodhisattvas, mahasattvas, wisdom beyond wisdom, maha prashna paramita.
You can be grateful for your talk. Thank you.
Thanks for being here, everyone.